All right, hello. Welcome to Module 4. So, you're almost halfway done. Good job. Okay, so this week we are looking at, I have the wrong paper. Okay, this week we are looking at how historical context impacts the understanding of, historical context impacts the understanding of everything. That's why I was very impressed with many of you in the Module 2 discussion. You pointed to some of the primary sources. Oh, that's another thing. All right, in your projects. So in your projects, you have to have a minimum of 3 sources. One of them has to be a primary source. A primary source does not provide background. It does not provide context. Those are secondary sources. Primary sources are written by people who were part of the event, the happening, their laws, legislation, newspaper articles, photographs, diaries, things like that. So if you're studying something that happened, say, in 1960, and you have your primary source as something that was published in 2010, it's probably not a primary source. You really need to look at that. I went light on the grading for Module 2 for your project proposal. As we get into Module 3, you already did Module 3. I'll grade that this week. That's your sources assignment. If there's an issue, I'll give detailed feedback and invite you to redo it. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that you understand the differences between primary and secondary sources, because with all historical issues, we really get our best understanding from those words that are written by actual participants. Secondary sources, we need them. They provide so much more information, external information, global information, so we need both. And that's why you're required to have at least 1 primary source for your project, 2 secondary sources, but we need both. So imagine with the horrible history of slavery in this country, if we only had secondary sources to go by, every time we write something, we have an objective. What was the objective of many of the secondary source writers? Some wanted to retell the story in as positive a light as they could because it was too horrific to get their minds around. So imagine if that was our only history. It would be incomplete and it would be inaccurate. We need those historical sources that come from actual participants so we understand their feelings, their thoughts, their experiences. And sometimes the narrative is uncomfortable. Sometimes the reality is uncomfortable. But it's important that we don't ignore that, because the history repeats because we refuse to learn. We refuse to study those uncomfortable parts enough to recognize characteristics when they start to repeat. It's when we ignore those uncomfortable parts, and they're hard and they're painful and they're horrible. And sometimes I have tears streaming down my face reading about different parts of history, but we can't ignore them, because when we ignore them, that's what opens the door to these horrible things repeating. Whether it's unfairness, whether it's something as horrific as slavery, that's what opens the door. If we ignore the hard part, we ignore a large portion of the characteristics that tell us, oops, this has already happened. We need to take action so it doesn't happen again. So this week, we are looking at historical interpretation. And that's really important too. History is told by humans. We all have a bias. We all have a perspective. So, all right. So this week, you have your discussion. The discussion is on your project topic that you picked in Module 2. And so you're going to summarize different narratives and perspectives connected to your individual topic based on your research. And you're going to make at least 1 connection to your historical topic for your project and something that you've either personally observed or learned recently, either in class or in the media or in your community. And why is that? It's because of the repetitive nature of history. We will always see it repeating again and again and again. The good things, that's wonderful. The bad things, we don't want those to repeat. So it's important we learn about them so we can take action to prevent them. Okay, so you have the discussion and then your assignment. Okay, for your assignment, one student reached out and said they were confused on what to submit. Always, you need to go to the guidelines and rubric for every assignment because it will have an overview, it will have directions, and then it has this wonderful magic phrase, what to submit. And that's what you submit. For this week, it's a 1 to 2 page Microsoft Word document, and then that meets the directions. The directions are laid out for you in the guidelines and rubric. Okay, I'm over my time. Reach out with questions. Happy Memorial Day. Take a minute and research on your phone why we have Memorial Day. It's important. All right, have a great day.